Hello and welcome to Hackerang TV. This is your host Adil Bandukwala. It's a lovely evening here in Bangalore, India, and it's so refreshing to see all the developers tuning in even at this late hour. For those of you who are in the Bay Area and Pacific time zone, a very good morning. To those in the Eastern time zone, good afternoon, and good evening to all my developer friends from the subcontinent in Asia. It's fascinating that we have close to 4,500 people who signed up for this particular live stream. I can already feel the vibe, I can feel the energy, I can feel the adrenaline. Where is that coming from? It is all coming from all of those comments that are coming in from LinkedIn, from YouTube, from Twitter, from Facebook, wherever you've tuned in from. Welcome. And like Tarun says, let's start. Absolutely, Tarun. We're bang on the money and we're starting right now. Akshay, good to see you. Dishank, good to see you. Shanky, good to see you. I can't quite pronounce your name because I don't understand that language. But thank you for joining us wherever you have from. It's good to see you as well. It's so nice to see all of you. Which is why I said I can literally feel the energy, the adrenaline, and the vibe. So tell us, what part of the world are you tuning in from? Drop in a comment so that we can get a sense of which location, country, city you're tuning in from. And I'll try and feature some of your comments on screen so that we can show Dan what kind of an audience we've curated for Dan particularly. We're delighted to kind of introduce to you Dan Gerrity, SVP of Developer Services for Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Dan joined Oracle in Jan 2020 to build and lead the team whose mission is to drive developer adoption and usage and enable building, deploying, and operating workloads at scale in Oracle's cloud. This mission includes CNCF influenced services like Kubernetes, streaming, lagging, events, and APIs. Before OCI, Dan spent 5 years at AWS building platforms. A developer most of his life, he founded and led several startups that ultimately took advantage of cloud services offered by multiple clouds. He has an MBA, an MS in EE computer systems, and a BS in EE, all from Stanford University, and has over 60 patents. I kid you not, that's 60. He has 60 patents in tech, ranging from coin discrimination through CPU instruction set design. Dan, thank you so much. Very grateful for having you. Thank you for joining us on HackerRank TV.
I'm super happy to be here. Love HackerRank. I've used it for years and I'm just super happy to be here.
You made our day by saying just that, Dan. Thank you. We can't wait to kind of get started. Now, with that, we also have with us today HackerRank's co-founder and CTO, Hari Shankaran Karunanidhi. Hari is right me with here. Both of us are in the Bangalore office today. Every time we have a live stream, it gives us the opportunity to go back from office. It also ensures that our broadband works properly and we don't have the glitch of power going off or potentially broadband getting cut when we're at home. So, Hari, thank you so much for making time like always. Pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Adil. Super excited for the conversation today.
All right, so let's see where all people are tuning in from. So I'm going to feature a few people, right? So we've got someone from Iran, Nafis. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you all the way from Iran. Let's see. We've got Abdul, who's from Bangalore. We've got Caroline, who's tuned in all the way from Wales. Good to see you, Caroline. We've got Chetan from Pune. We've got Trixie. Thanks for joining in, Trixie. Good to see you. We have our good friend Jesse. Jesse, hello. Good to see you. Good to see you tuning into this live stream as well. Jesse's tuned in from Vancouver, Canada. We've got Anthony, who's coming from Kenya. We've got Ali. Ali, good to see you from Turkey, my friend. I'd love to get to Turkey someday. I heard the kebabs there are delicious. We also have someone from Nigeria, Muhammad. Good to see you from Nigeria, Muhammad. You've got Sagar from Bhopal. We've got Ismail from Morocco. We've got Ahmed from Egypt. We've got Adria from Barcelona. We've got Vincenzo from England. Man, this is pretty crazy. Girish coming in from US. This is pretty much insane. You've got someone from Greece. We've got Roger from Spain. We've got David from Peru. It's fascinating. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Please continue tuning in. We'd love to kind of continue the conversation with you. All right, let me just give me a second and we get started with this particular live stream. Okay, we're just trying to restore one particular connection. All right, we're good. And I'm going to jump back. So the theme for today is life as a developer on Oracle Cloud. Dan, I'd love to get started with the first couple of questions for you. We've curated these questions from our community, and we've also tried to kind of prep and see how best we could make use of your time. So enterprise cloud spending is projected to increase at a 16% CAGR, cumulative average growth rate, between 2016 and 2026, which is this particular decade we are in, which indicates that businesses are no longer looking at the cloud slowly as a tool, but more like a platform. We'd love to know from you, Dan, as a cloud veteran, how is the way businesses leveraging the cloud changing?
That's a great question. And, when I hear that question, I can relate that to the Gardner study also that says that 85% of all organizations will embrace a cloud first principle by 2025. Those numbers to me are shockingly low, believe it or not. I mean, I guess that's the problem, is I've been in the cloud too long, but I honestly believe that, as corporations, and large and small, begin to see the agility and the scaling that they can get using the cloud, any cloud, they're just going to flock to it. It just offers so many advantages over trying to build your own data center, and all the, there's a lot of transformations that have to happen, and I can talk about that in a bit. And so it kind of makes it a little bit harder for some of the larger organizations to do this. But the benefits of the cloud are just too compelling. They're gonna take over. I mean, the agility, the scalability, the flexibility, the cost savings, these things are all going to drive everyone to the cloud without exception. So I think those numbers are low.
Wow, that is quite a revelation. Just when you think like those numbers are insane, here comes an expert who says that those numbers are low, which pretty much shows why this is the time to be a developer and develop the skills that are required to foster business in the cloud.
Just following up on that comment, I think most people, most people think that people go to the cloud for the cost savings, and I think maybe some do. But once they start developing anything in the cloud and they realize how quickly they can make changes or deploy a new service, or, oh, you need a new database, you press a button and you've got a database. Oh, you want to try using a stream or a queue or something like this, you can just push a button and have it happen. And so what happens is, especially the larger organizations that think that they can somehow harvest a cost savings to go to the cloud. So it's usually like the chief financial officer that says, hey, we should move to the cloud. And then you get there and then the developers are going, wow, this makes my job so much easier. And we can deploy new releases of our product every week, or we can, we just have so much more agility. So I think the drive is economic, but the benefit is agility.
I think that's very, very well put, Dan. Let's get into a little bit into the business, right? The cloud has transformed multiple businesses by improving information efficiency, helping them reduce costs, streamline the entire software across enterprise, mid-market, SMB, large organizations, all possible kind of businesses. With your experience, is there any distinction in the way large-scale organizations, enterprises and SMBs use and spend for the cloud?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And I think to a certain extent leads a little bit to why, Oracle is a little different than the other clouds. And I'll explain that. So I think, yes, we do see differences between these sort of classes. And we kind of have maybe three classes. There's maybe the large enterprise customer, which of course Oracle is very familiar with because they've been using Oracle database technology for 20 years. So we know these people pretty well. Financial services, all these large organizations that have serious transaction processing needs. So there is that sort of large enterprise customer. Then what you're talking about here, SMB, the small and medium-sized businesses, they typically are taking a SaaS approach as they grow their business, and so they're a little bit more comfortable with having stuff in the cloud. And then you have your small companies that are typically born in the cloud, as we would say. And so the major differences that we see there, it really has a lot to do with security and compliance, and so also those transformations that I was telling you about. So first, let me talk a bit about the security and compliance aspects. So these larger enterprises, they've got databases with people's PII in them, with people's credit cards in them, and in order to do this, they have to meet all kinds of standards, and they have to be certified by all these different certification companies to be compliant with specific laws and regulations. So in order for them, for example, to move a database with PII into the cloud, they have to make sure that they can retain or gain a new certification or retain the certification that they already have. So that's a little bit of extra work. And also they want to make sure that they pick, a cloud provider that has the capability that can make that easy. And so we see a lot of larger enterprises hanging on to their existing data centers, keeping PII and credit card data safe within their own perimeter. And then for them to move to the cloud, it is a security and compliance effort. Small and medium-sized businesses already have their data in the cloud. They're already using SaaS suppliers, for example, to process their credit cards. They're already in the cloud. And so for them, it's much easier to extend. However, they're typically using SaaS services already. So what they want to do is extend their SaaS solutions that they have. So that's a little bit of a different approach to the cloud. Born in the cloud is, of course, born in the cloud. And what we find with them is they're often not worrying about security and compliance until they have to worry about it. And so that's one of the reasons that, we spend a lot of time and energy making security and compliance easy. So when our developers come and develop, and I don't mean this to be an ad, but when our developers come on and use Oracle Cloud, we basically make them look like heroes in front of the security and compliance people. And I can talk about why in a minute. But let me backpedal a little bit and just talk about the 3 transformations that have to happen to move from software in a data center to software in the cloud. When you have software in a data center, you're buying hardware, for example, on a 2 or 3 year cycle. You've got a capital expenditure budget. You go through all this planning, you order the stuff, it comes, you've got people in the data center that configure it and all that. Financially speaking, all your data center expenses are capital expenditures. And when you move to the cloud, that all changes. Instead of having 1 or 2 people making all the decisions about what equipment you're going to buy, you've got all your developers out there making decisions every single day about what to spin up and what not to spin up. This drives many companies insane, right? Because they're so used to having 1 or 2 people, they can just call them and say, hey, what's our IT spend next year? And they already know because they've already bought all the hardware. In the cloud, that all changes and it becomes operating expense. So that's one big transformation. The second one is, of course, the technologies that are available. So if you're a corporation and you have your own data center and you're running Windows everywhere, you're going to have a certain set of technologies that you're going to be developing for. When you get to the cloud, all of a sudden you can use anything you want, any brand of Unix. You can use Windows, of course. You can use Macs. You can use anything you want because it's all out there. So that the technologies change, and you are also using things to communicate between microservices, or you're using Kubernetes and you're using service mesh to wire it all together, and you're using queues and streaming. to link your application components together. It's a lot different than when you're developing for a data center. And so that's the second one, is the technology. And then the third one is you have to change the way you develop software. And this is moving from, waterfall, where it used to be, design, code, test, and you'd do that over a period of 3 months or 6 months, and you'd do a release every 3 months or a release every 6 months. Now in the cloud, you're doing CI/CD. You write some code, you commit it. It goes up for a code review to another coder. They pass it. It goes to production. I mean, it goes through all the stages, of course. It has to go through testing, integration testing, etc. But you're pushing code every day out to production, and that's just a very different way of doing software. So those are the three transformations that have to be made. Those transformations are harder for enterprises to make, due to security and compliance, due to budgets, and so forth. And so we tend to see small and medium-sized businesses moving into the cloud using open source technologies. They're less afraid of open source technologies. There's less security and compliance issues around open source. So they're out there. The enterprises, it's very deliberate, and they move applications whole lockstep. Boom.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan, for giving us the trifecta of what's catapulting the cloud onto a totally different level these days. Now, I've got a ton of questions I want to ask, but then I know Hari wants to ask you a few questions as well. And a lot of those questions might also want to come from the audience. So I was practically counting the number of countries that people have participated in from today. Manually, I saw that number is north of 30, which is incredible. So we've got participation from 30 different countries today. So if you have any question that you'd like to ask Dan, or Hari for that matter, please feel free to comment that question. And what I will do is then I can pick up that particular question and flash it on screen, just like this. Hey, Kiran, good to see you. Hello. So just like that, I will flash it on the screen, and then we can go ahead and ask Dan, and Dan will be happy to answer. So just like, for example, Chirag is asking, what is CI/CD? Before Dan can answer, it's continuous integration, continuous development. Dan, if you can confirm that is correct or incorrect,
yes,
bonus points to this person.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I always tell people at my own company that are speaking, don't use acronyms, because not everyone will know. But CI/CD is this process of continuous integration, continuous development. What that means, so in the old days, remember, you'd write some software and you'd commit it to RVS or whatever version control system you have, and then every night you'd do a build. That's the integration, is the build. And then if the build failed because of your code, you had to come in and, I don't know, we used to put a dollar bill in a jar. And then, at the end of the project, when it shipped, we all enjoyed a nice party based on who could build or not. Well, in continuous integration, what happens is every time you make a commit, and depending on how you set it up, but I'll just do it how we do it. Anytime you make a commit, another code reviewer gets a message, and a different engineer looks at your commit and says yes or no. And if they say yes, that commit is merged into the master branch, and it's built right then and there. The software is built right then and there and run against all the integration, all the unit tests. If it passes the unit tests, it goes on to the integration tests. If it passes all those, it goes out to an alpha environment where it's live. If it passes all those tests, it goes to beta, and then it goes to production. So that's the continuous deployment part. The continuous integration means when you commit your code, it builds right then and there. So every time somebody does a commit, your software is rebuilding itself all the time, continuously. And then it gets pushed out all the way out to production. Now, in order to do this, you have to have super high confidence in your unit tests and integration tests, because there's no gates. I mean, the gates are automated. So like if your software passes the test, it's going out to production. So you kind of want to make sure you have good tests in place. And that's why the whole practice of CI/CD, first of all, it improves velocity, because seriously, you make a change right now, it can be out in production in the wild in 6 hours. Like, you don't have to wait for any DevOps team or any deployment schedule, anything. It just goes. So again, getting back to agility. But the other thing it does is it really does encourage developers to do test-driven design. I mean, you really do have to have some good testing frameworks and some good ability to do load testing and distributed testing and all these kinds of things, because you got to have the capability to test to put in CI/CD. So that's CI/CD. People, some people don't make a distinction between CI and CD. Some people use slightly different words, but that's why we just call it CI/CD. It's kind of the whole pipeline from commit to production.
Brilliantly said. Thank you so much, Dan and Chirag. So there, we hope you got it. It was very well explained by Dan what CI/CD is. And then if anyone else has more questions, feel free to comment just like that, and I'll feature your question on screen and we can ask that to Dan. In the meanwhile, I'm picking up common threads. So I see that there are at least 12 to 13 people who've asked that same question. How can you potentially join Oracle? I think that's a rather simple one to answer. Oracle is soon going to be conducting a hackathon. And it's coming up on screen right now. So if you're keen to be part of Oracle's cloud, if you'd like to be notified about their hackathon, which is coming in soon, you can go to that particular URL that is on screen. Once you go to that particular URL, you can sign up. You will be notified as and when the hackathon is live. Participate in the hackathon, and then there's your chance to be a part of Oracle Cloud. With that, if you have any other questions, do type in the comments. Otherwise, I'm handing it over to Hari. I know, Hari, you've been itching to ask those questions.
Thanks, Adil. I've been waiting for to start with some of the technical questions I always wanted to ask Dan. Then first, I want to start with how you're using AI, and AI as a technology has revolutionized multiple sectors without any exception, and cloud computing is no stranger to it. As end users, we have just launched, say, containers or use cloud to build AI. I would love to know how more insights on how AI is leveraged by Oracle Cloud. Like, how does cloud use AI to build cloud? Like, can you give more insights there?
Well, sure. Yeah, we are using so artificial intelligence or machine learning, and again, just explaining acronyms, and most people just say AI/ML. And usually people kind of distinguish those two things, but for this question, we're just going to call it AI/ML. And Oracle has had a long history of doing AI/ML. Mostly, again, it's the database legacy. So they put AI/ML services right into the database. Well, they're still there today, but they've been doing that for a long time. So now we've taken that and put it into the cloud, and every cloud, of course, has AI/ML capabilities, and they make those services available to developers, just like you said. So if someone wants to do, for example, sentiment analysis, they want to understand, they have comments that they receive back, and they have 30,000 comments, and they want to sift through and see, are these comments positive or negative? They can just call, it's literally a service called sentiment analysis. They can just send that data in, and they get a JSON back, good, bad, ugly, in terms of sentiment analysis. But internally, we are using the same technology to help our developers. So, example, CI/CD. So if you're doing CI/CD, we just talked about how you need to kick off a build every approved commit. And so how do we do that build? I mean, do we use big virtual machines or little virtual machines, or do we use, how much memory do these things need, and all of these things? And so what we do is we watch your builds, and we adjust the configuration of the machines that we're using to do your build according to your preference. So you put a little dial in, you say, I'd like my builds to be fast. Okay, that's going to cost a little bit more money, but we'll optimize for fast. We'll do more parallelism. Boy, more parallelism. And potentially we'll use bigger VMs. It depends on, if you're building Java, we know how much memory it takes to do a good Java build, etc. So we use AI to first guess what you're going to need because, you're using Java and you're using these dependencies and you're using this cache and so forth. And then we watch what happens and then we tune it. And so basically every build you do gets better and better and better. Same thing with Kubernetes. So we're really starting to observe these patterns that people are doing with Kubernetes. And you'd be surprised at how many people are kind of doing a similar thing, right? They're looking at either CPU or memory, and they're wanting to expand or, to scale out their infrastructure or scale it in. And this is something that Kubernetes, which is a container orchestration system, something that Kubernetes does really well, but you kind of have to tell it what you want. And so this way, applying AI, now we can move to a managed scale out. And that's very helpful for developers. Another area that we're using, and this one is really actually pretty cool. I mean, there is nothing worse than being in charge of patching. And the reason I say that is because it never works. Like, you have a gazillion different versions and flavors of operating systems out there. You get a new release, you need to apply this operating system release, and often you need to reboot the machine. And when you reboot the machine, the services come up in a slightly different order and something doesn't work. And so it's really a pain in the rear. Well, Oracle's been doing a lot of work in this area. And we have, for example, Oracle Linux, which can do an in-memory patch. But also what we're doing is we're looking at, for not just the operating system, but also the Java runtime and some of the other runtimes. But I think Java runtime in particular, we know what you're using. We know what the security threats are. We can actually figure out which patches to apply to your stuff in which order so that we don't disrupt your service. That is a really cool use of AI on the cloud side. The developer never sees this. All they know is that they don't have to patch their machines, or they don't have to reboot as they're patching. They get the advisory. They can decide whether they want it automatically applied or on request. But the answer is the same. So we're using that AI technology to simplify the life of the developer, either automate patching, automate scaling, automate building, all these things, but doing it against a hard problem. So you need a whole bunch of data to figure it out.
All right, thanks for that. And I would have predicted scaling and building to be automated, but patching was never in the list of things I ever imagined AI is going to go and help. I thought it's a standard boring thing. You take it, apply it, hopefully it works, pray for it, and then you are going to go to the next version, and so on.
I think it's the pray for it that is the killer, because we have to patch. Obviously, we patch, all continuously, and it's everyone's challenge. It's a challenge in the cloud.
Yeah, it's amazing to see AI take over that. And talking about the technology of future, there's with Web3 and right now decentralization gaining a lot of prevalence. Do you think like cloud computing faces a threat from something more decentralized like distributed computing? Like, is the Web3 going to help growth of cloud, or is it against the cloud at this point?
Well, so I mean, I think it's judo, which I'll explain in a minute. But first, I just want to make sure that our listeners understand Web3. I'm just thinking that if logically, if people are saying, CI/CD, maybe we're trying to learn something about Web3 too. But the idea behind Web3, right, is to push the computing out to the data, to push the computing out to the edge, to use zero trust between machines. So meaning the old PKI certificates aren't necessarily going to work. And you're trying to distribute the ownership and distribute the monetization of the web. Now, I don't see it competing. So the way that judo works is, you use the force and the energy of your opponent in your direction. So if somebody comes and lunges at you, you take advantage of that. So I think that's really what's going to happen with Web3. One of the things that Oracle is doing, and again, I mean, everyone's doing it. So this isn't an Oracle ad, but I think we're doing it a little bit more aggressively and certainly more completely than our competitors. But that's moving the cloud out to the edge, moving it all the way into our customers' data centers. So customers, again, are reluctant to put their PII and other sensitive data in the cloud. They want to keep it contained in their data center. Now Oracle has a 12, well, I shouldn't say how many racks it is, but it's a small set of racks that you can put in your own data center, and you have the Oracle cloud in your data center, the whole Oracle cloud, not just compute and storage, and a few other things like this. But it's actually what we call a dedicated realm cloud at customer. We call it DRCC. So that's the ultimate expression of computing on the edge, because you have compute, database, storage, networking, all the CI/CDs, or everything you have. And you can take your cloud that you have in your own data center and you can wire it up to the internet, in which case it's just like Oracle's public cloud, or you can isolate it from the internet, in which case it's your own private cloud. And we've proven this technology out now in the US government on multiple occasions, where we have a complete cloud and we're able to still update that cloud. We keep the software, everything running with the latest releases. We get our 4 nines of availability, and yet these people get to have all these services with microsecond latency and inside their own firewall, if you will. So I think what we're seeing is I think Web3 is a trend that the whole cloud is going to move to. I guess that's the way to answer the question. And I do worry a little bit about, there are some lofty ideals in Web3, like, the financial ownership and like blockchain, basically everybody being able to do everything anonymously. And I think that's good. But I think ultimately the reason that there are only sort of 4 US cloud providers and 2 Chinese cloud providers is that it takes a lot of capital to do it right. And it's going to, and those people that have to spend the capital are typically the ones that get the remuneration. So I worry about that part a little bit. But as far as being distributed, zero trust, anonymity, no certificates, yeah, I see that happening.
That's good. And having the entire cloud in the private data center, I think that's the right example of best of both worlds. Like you have everything, and you have cloud in your setup, and that leads to the next question I wanted to ask, which is, Oracle is a little new to the cloud game with its platform established in 2016 compared to AWS in 2006 and Google Cloud in 2008. You already mentioned one. Love to know more on how is Oracle differentiating itself from other established players in this space, and what is the focus on with respect to hiring for Oracle Cloud?
Sure. Well, let me take your first question first about like established in 2016, and it's true. Oracle's cloud is established in 2016. But we have worked so quickly. If you line up 2016 with 2006 for AWS, and then you look at the growth and in revenue and services and all the things that they have, we are completely outstripping them. It's not to say it's going to go on forever, but I think that because we're a second fast follow, if you will, it's not even that fast, because we're a second comer, we've been able to avoid a lot of the challenges that I think the other clouds have had to deal with. And the first example of that is I just explained about how we can have a DRCC, a dedicated cloud region in someone's data center. Well, we have to build that. You install the hardware, but we have to create the cloud within that hardware. This is something that is really hard to do. It's almost impossible to describe, but you can imagine that, for example, storage, meaning like, let's say attached storage, so a disk drive, it needs compute to be able to build its service. Well, compute needs block storage to be able to build its thing. And so they depend on each other. And so you can't just sort of say build A, then B, then C. It's more like trying to do a package management in Unix and having it be hopelessly convoluted. And so from the outset, we knew we were going to have to build these regions with a button press. And we're not quite there, but we're darn close. So when we want to build a region, we push a button. It creates a virtual environment, and we build out the infrastructure, the core infrastructure. Then we copy that into the new region. Then all the software services come on in a specific order. They advertise what capabilities they have, advertise what capabilities they need. And we're kind of applying a little bit of our own AI to try to figure this out. And we build. So we're the only cloud, as far as I know, that can do that can push a button and build a region. And because of that, we have a lot of regions. We already have 40 regions. I think, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say, but we have a lot more coming. And Oracle's strategy. So I think AWS, for example, likes to build large data centers that have 3 availability zones. And those are separated by 100 miles and this kind of thing. Well, Oracle's customers are more, hey, they want to build an app in one region, and then they want to have a DR region nearby in typically the same country, but the same zone at least. And so that's Oracle's strategy, really, is a lot more regions, and regions that really have a primary and secondary site in the same country. And so that's how you'll see Oracle spreading out. And again, this is for customers that want to have PII, European customers wanting to keep their customers' private information in their country. We call these sovereign clouds. And there's a lot of countries out there and a lot of businesses out there that want to keep their data within certain geographical boundaries. And we can do that better than any other cloud. So we can put it in your data center if you want, or we can put it in a nearby city with a successful DR plan. So that's one thing that what we're doing. And then I think the other thing is that Oracle is big on hybrid. Like, I don't think we have a single customer that's not, well, I shouldn't say that. That's a terrible thing to say. I think many of our larger organizations are running some in their data center and some in Oracle's cloud. And we even have a connection with Microsoft's cloud, a super high-speed interconnect. So if you want to run a .NET application, for example, against an Oracle database, you can do that. You just run. So not only are we hybrid between private data center and public cloud, but we're also hybrid cloud to cloud. So I think that that's something that's unique for us. Again, I'll go back to the security and compliance. We have we have a centralized control plane, and I don't know how deep people want to get into this, but every internal service basically uses an internal API gateway. And so we're able to provide all the governance features of an API gateway, throttling, tagging, we do logging, so basically, no matter what the service is, we know who created what resource when. And so this data is available to the customer free, and you don't have to do anything. And so it's makes it really easy for a developer to build something and then again just go to the compliance officer and say, here's your log. Here's what everyone's doing, and it's the whole cloud. Nobody else has that. So I mean, we also offer some migration solutions, particularly for database users. So I think, other clouds are like, thou shalt not use relational databases. We're obviously not like that, because actually relational databases are a pretty damn good tool. And so we support that, and we support some migration from on-prem to the cloud. And of course, we have Oracle database, which is arguably the world's highest performance database, but we also have MySQL, arguably the world's most popular open source database. So we've got all these different things to choose from. So, and then finally, price performance. We do have, like, our high performance computing, for example, we still have bare metal available. So that's pretty unusual. You can get some pretty awesome performance out of the Oracle Cloud, and it's affordably priced. So with respect to hiring, I think that the pandemic has changed that a little bit. I have my team now. I have, I don't know, a certain number of people, but I think I'm in like 55 cities in 22 countries right now. And we were kind of trying to centralize these things and trying to kind of create centers, like in Bengaluru, or, we have our India Development Center down there. We've got a lot of people there, and we're hiring pretty aggressively in India. And then when the pandemic hit, now it's much more, we're pretty sure that people can work from anywhere. And so it's much easier. We can hire from pretty much anywhere in the world. So I think, I'm not sure what you were curious about you mean in terms of like hiring, how do we differentiate ourselves against our competitors from a hiring perspective? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, some of the differentiating things you're building, how does that affect the the technologies you're hiring for, or the skills you're hiring for, and levels you're hiring for? Like, how does the new things you're building, for example, I'm still when the DRCC, or the clouded customer, it's one of those things when before you build, or when someone pitches that idea, the right reaction is like, are you crazy? And then once you build it, it feels like magic. Like there is no other way to describe it. Like I'm still amazed by the amount of complexity which can go through in that. And to hire for something like that, like what do
Well,
you
it's funny because you and I have had this conversation where I've sort of said, hey, I wish that HackerRank, and we can talk about this again offline, but there is a lot. I mean, the fact of the matter is, and whether you agree with this or not, or like it or not, the fact is that people have to be able to write automation software. So like, it's not just about writing the Java on your laptop and watching the robot go around. Like, I mean, people do need to write hardcore Java, multi-threaded, distributed systems. But then they also need to write code to deploy that system, to test that system, to make sure that system is able to be up and healthy after a patch, to make sure that that system is operating at 4 nines of availability. And a lot of times people come in thinking, okay, I've been hired as a software developer at fill in the blank cloud. This isn't true just for Oracle. I mean, somebody said, oh, I've been hired to develop, Java, or I get to write Rust for AWS, and I'm going to design all these cool applications. And you do, but you also end up writing automation software in Python or in Bash script or in some other tool. And I think that people are not really exposed to that. So certainly if somebody has some SRE experience or has some automation experience, they're going to be a much more attractive hire for us.
Got it. Got it. My last question is when cloud has its own challenges, right? Like the cloud has changed the ways in which we build, deploy software, but comes with its challenge. And one is when the cloud has its own outages, right? Like we have seen, and when the cloud goes down, it takes multiple services along with it. And can you give us more insight on if there are steps being taken to mitigate these problems, either from the cloud or the platform side, or from the customers and the company side? Like what do we need to do to reduce the risk from the outages?
Yeah, so good question. I think with respect to our cloud, for example, there's all kinds of things we're doing to get to 4 nines. We want to be 4 nines. This, 4 minutes of outage in a month, something like that. And sometimes even that's not acceptable to a customer. I mean, certain services, for example, DNS have to be 5 nines or 6. We can't really tolerate that kind of. But availability is on everyone's mind, and the problem is, as we've been talking about, this interdependency and interconnectivity, and this depends on that, which depends on this, and so often people don't realize that their software is vulnerable to, for example, a DNS failure, or, for example, a block storage failure, or a networking failure. So I think, what we're doing about that is understanding our dependencies. And that's part of the work that we have to do to build the region anyway. So we're just extending that into operating the region. So if I know what I'm relying on, my service, if I honestly know what I'm relying on, then I can build in contingencies. So we're doing, what we can. I do think that, Oracle's cloud is high availability, high reliability, along with the other leading cloud providers. I think, for customers, it's a challenge. So I think if you're an AWS customer, often you get the advice, hey, there's 3 availability zones in a region. Take advantage of that. Make sure you're deploying in all 3 of those AZs, because then if one goes down, you still have 2. I think Oracle customers are more likely to do a primary secondary than a primary secondary with a failover. And I'm just saying this is what we're seeing. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but I think, as a customer, you kind of have to understand those 2 different approaches. If you do rely on the 3 AZ approach, yeah, if one AZ goes down, you're probably going to be safe. But as we've seen, sometimes the whole region goes down. And personally, I think that the customers that sort of set it up with a primary, secondary failover are in much better shape, because the whole region, maybe only part of the region goes down, but they still can fail over to a secondary site. Now, maybe that's less cost effective. I don't know. You kind of, and we also offer fault domains within our regions. So, but these are not separate data centers like they are at other cloud providers. These are separate power supplies, separate racks, separate, if the data center goes offline, then you'll still lose it. So I think most of our enterprise customers are going primary, secondary.
Got it. I mentioned that's the last question, but the developer side of me, I do want to ask one more question, which is what is life like for a developer on Oracle Cloud? What does their career look like? What roles are changing the game, and what are aspirational in the world of Oracle Cloud? Like, what if I'm a dev working in Oracle Cloud, what kind of challenges will I be solving there?
Developer working for Oracle?
Oracle Cloud, yes.
Yeah. Well, we we have a lot of great challenges. I mean, building these distributed systems is really insane. I mean, if you're a developer and you're in school and you're learning about the CAP theorem and, and guarantees about exactly once, only at least once, exactly once, or, these things are big, big, big issues. Trying to do distributed locking, trying to build services that span regions, trying to build cross-realm replication when you have a completely different set of secrets in one realm and another. Like, these are big problems, and all of the cloud providers have them. I think for us, with so many regions, we tend to have a lot of challenges with these, distributed systems that are distributed across regions. So I think really, if you come to Oracle, you can come out of college, you can come as more like an IC3 with, 3, 4, or 5 years of work experience. And the first thing you're going to get into is, highly scalable, highly distributed. Watch how, what is your thread pool, and are you paying attention to that? Because you could exhaust your thread pool. Or if you're running node, how many processes are you running? Because, you can get exhausted, and just having to look at all of those pooled resources and making sure you're alarming on it, because these things just grow and grow and grow. I mean, we see like our streaming service this year is up 500x what it was last year. So like, if you didn't think about that when you were building the streaming service, it's going to be dead, right? I mean, how can 500x the throughput, petabytes, and it's just crazy. And so I think it's really about thinking big, about what we call 10x thinking. I don't want anyone working on any line of code that can't handle 10 times what it's handling today, because otherwise it's not worth it. Like, don't work on something to get a 10% performance improvement. So it's really a different mindset. It's really about scalability. It's about distributed. It's about multi-threaded, multi-process computing that hits 4 nines of availability. And that is not easy. So it's a great challenge for any developer, honestly.
Thanks for sharing that. I think 4 nines is about, you can go maybe a couple of seconds a day, or like not like it's few minutes a quarter, like 2 to 3 minutes a quarter, if I remember correctly. I know, Adil, you have a ton of questions from the people who are watching this, and I know you have a few questions as well. Over to you.
Sure, thank you, Hari. So a lot of questions coming in from the audience. There's one from Alex Mann. Alex is based in Ashland, Oregon in the United States. And this is his question. He says, Dan, what kind of growth do you see in security/identity management? And what are the new challenges these roles will face with implementation of cloud and CI/CD?
Okay, I think I should take the first part of that question and make sure that I understand it. So what are the challenges we're seeing in identity? Is that kind of
identity management?
Well, that I mean, that is huge, right? That's absolutely enormous. And it used to be that kind of the world was like, oh, well, we're going to use Active Directory. And then it was like, well, we need our Active Directory to be out in the cloud. Okay, well, we'll use, Microsoft's cloud Active Directory, and that's it. Everything relies on that. Well, it doesn't really work like that. And I think there's a lot of identity issues when you get into the cloud. First of all, people are trying to merge cloud, SaaS, and on-prem. So you've got effectively 3 sources of identity right there. Like, you can't, and that's just one SaaS provider. Most of these people are using, such and such and such and such. And they, in the old days, it used to be, okay, we'll just use SSO, and, we'll use SAML, and we'll basically tie to the corporate identity system. You can't do that in a distributed system. If you have a system that's spanning multiple regions, you need to authenticate in those different regions. You have different tenancies in those different regions. You have different credentials, and you need to use, a vault and, a secrets vault. And then you need the secret to the other vault in the vault. And it just gets very, very complicated. And what the challenges are is federating all these things. So it really is trying to give one person one place they can sign in, and that will give them access to all the different things that they need. And this is really a challenging thing to do in identity. If someone could kind of reinvent identity from the ground up, they'd probably do it a lot differently. So that's what we're doing. We have sort of this, what we call an identity domain, and then you can hang a bunch of different identities onto this one, and you can have multiple identity domains in case you're using multiple regions and so forth, and you can link them. But these are really big problems, and they require a lot of thought and a lot of understanding of security, crypto, this kind of thing. So there's a lot of challenges there. What was the second part of your question? I missed it. You were just thinking about identity
Yes.
as a whole.
Yes. So the second part of the question is, what new challenges will those roles face with the implementation of cloud and CI/CD?
Oh, cloud and CI/CD. Well, so CI/CD, we're basically using Vault. So Vault is a hardware security module, an HSM, a cloud HSM, and so you can store credentials in the vault safely. And so that's what we're doing for CI/CD. So we're, because you're deploying to something, and that something needs to be either a region or a Kubernetes cluster or a grouping of VMs or whatever it is. And so that's got to have the credentials. We put them in a vault. The developer doesn't have to know what the credentials are, which is really nice. And there's no storage of any credentials on somebody's laptop. So that's how we're managing it. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Dan. With that, I think we're just on time. I know there were a lot of questions. It's fascinating how time has gone by. It's been close to an hour we've been talking. And Dan, believe it or not, there are more than 617 comments that I see right now that have come in on LinkedIn alone. I mean, you think about Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, I'm sure there are much more, but I was just trying to refresh LinkedIn and see what kind of comments, questions have come in. I just saw there are 617. So clearly, a lot of questions, a lot of interest. Very grateful to you, Dan, for your time in making some time today to interact with our community. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Hari, thanks a lot for making time like always. And to all of you who tuned in from all those 32 plus countries that I counted, and I'm sure there are much more, thank you very much. You have a great day. You have a great afternoon. And to all of those night owls in India and in the Asian subcontinent, good night and God bless.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.